having arrived, I think the hour of 7 o'clock having arrived, we'll go ahead and start the council meeting. So welcome to the November 14th, 2012 council meeting. Mayor Cabaldan had some prior commitments, so he'll be joining us in about a half hour or so. The council did meet in closed session. Mr. City Attorney, you want to report out on?
Yes, the council met in closed session to consider the initiation of litigation. No action was taken.
Great, thank you very much. All right, before we get started, we'll start off with the pledge, which this evening will be led by Mr. Valentino Rodriguez.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item 1A is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the council. And I do have some slips to speak. First slip is by Ms. Pat Flint.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm back again once again to talk about police and fire safety. I had a few of my facts wrong last week, one of them being the pumper truck. I know now that it was not that. It was something a little bit more dramatic. I won't go into those details right now. But one thing I want to bring to your attention is Measure J and K, and the sales tax are to help fund fire and police. Has any of that been cut from those two budget criteria? Because you seem to be wanting to cut fire and police more than anything else. And are most of your decisions being made behind closed doors? You must have public input. It is against the law to make decisions without public input. And I haven't seen anything in recent months that allow the public to come before you other than at meetings and get answers. Now, I know you don't speak at meetings. I've not had any calls back from anybody else on any questions that I've had. And I would like to have some answers to the questions I've had the last few weeks. The developers are welcome in this town. We've always been pro-development. But in Southport, you must adhere to the Southport Framework Plan. I've given you a copy of 06-63, the resolution that you agreed upon with the citizens of the Southport area to keep an initiative off the ballot. If this agreement is not agreed to, this resolution is not agreed to, we will take further action. It does not include the north area of town. It includes the Southport area. And it shows on here that fire and safety were a big part of our resolution. You need to listen to the public. You need to have more forms of public input. I applaud Mr. Johansson. He goes out into the public and has his meetings with public people. I haven't been to one in a while, and I apologize. I didn't think I had to be a watchdog again, but evidently I do. So I urge citizens of this town to get busy and start looking at what the City Council is planning and doing, because some of it we may not agree to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Flint. All right, next speaker, Ms. Maria Simas.
Good evening. My name is Maria Simas, and I'm the Vice President of the West Sacramento Foundation. I'm here to personally invite all of you to our upcoming event, which is the Hope Stocking event and capital campaign. The West Sacramento Foundation was founded in 1988 to provide funding and support to organizations that serve West Sacramento. They include funding for senior organizations, children organizations, education, the arts, and healthcare. In the last years since inception, we have distributed over $350,000 back into the community. Last year alone, over $50,000. We also have support from the council with Oscar Villegas and Bill Christoph on our board. We hope you will join us and continue to support West Sacramento by attending our event. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Sorry. Did you give a date for the event? You want to let folks at home know?
It's November 29th. It'll be at the Club Pheasant from 5:30 to 8:30. We will be providing hors d'oeuvres, and it'll be a wine tasting. It's a great event. It was well attended last year, and we thank you for listening.
Thank you for your time. I know this is certainly a worthy cause, and we've been able to do a lot of wonderful things in our community with the help of volunteers and the fundraising efforts that have been undertaken. So thank you. All right, next speaker, Mr. Bill Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. William Lowell, West Sacramento, for the record. I noticed we've got a nice big fence between 3rd and 5th Streets from what used to be West Capitol Avenue over to G Street, I think it is, or thereabouts, a couple of square blocks anyway. And I've heard it's going to be mostly housing, but I imagine the ground floor will probably be retail businesses, and I hope we're including a buffet-type restaurant equal to the Hometown Buffet or Golden Corral over there. And we should certainly have adequate public restrooms, considering what certain lawsuits have caused to happen at existing restrooms. And and I also think that now that we are represented by the same state senator and assemblyman as our neighbors on the other side of the river, that it should be a lot easier to construct another bridge across the Sacramento River down around the Southport, South Sacramento area. And this would reduce pollution and save a lot of time. And I think this is another strong argument to go to the governor and retain a lot of that redevelopment money that could go a long ways towards financing that new bridge. And I will let it go at that, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lowell. Next speaker, Mr. Anthony Latanzio. Yeah, he's not going to speak. Okay, all right, great, thank you very much. All right, those are all the slips that I have to speak on item 1A. Item 1B is council communications and assignments. Are there any communications this evening, then? Nope.
Yep. Just a quick one. This morning, I attended the Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District meeting. Just a few agenda items. One had to do with the workshop on reallocating funds from AB 923 incentive programs, really looking at possible uses towards agricultural equipment replacement, as well as the district is also looking at starting their lawnmower exchange program and looking at a rebate program for residents in the district to exchange their old gas-powered and polluting lawnmowers with a rebate towards electrical lawnmowers, powered lawnmowers. And they're working with the good news is they're working with local retailers, hardware stores, or Lowe's or Home Depot, other local stores in the county to try to get the program generated so they can be purchased at local stores. So that was some good news, and that will be rolling out, I think, at the beginning of the year. That's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Ledesma. And this morning I attended the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District Board meeting, and the one item to note, let the council know the district adopted Alternative 1 methodology. It's essentially a methodology that's going to lay out sort of the roadmap for the advanced wastewater treatment plant construction of the big plant that I bring up to the council at every meeting. So that methodology is now in place, and so although it doesn't include specifically any fees, that work for the future fee increases to build that plant are going to be forthcoming in the next 12 months. Right. With that, item 1C is council appointments to boards and commissions. We have none this evening. That takes us to consent agenda items 2 through 8. Are there any questions or comments on any of the items? Others? So I have questions on 6 and 8, and we have a memo in front of us regarding item agenda 4. Okay, so item 6, is that you, Bill, or is that Mark? Mr. Christoph?
Okay. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hey, with the cloud over construction by the development community due to tax increment issues, are we sure that this development is moving forward? Do we have the assurances? Because, I mean, there's some tax increment issues out there that, because of redevelopment and all of that, I just want to make sure that we're going to be receiving our projects.
The developer that has the development surrounding Garden Park is making statements to the media that he intends to construct in the spring, and I also have his vice president of marketing here if you'd like to.
No, that's fine. I just wanted, it was a question and just wanted to make sure that it's all happening. Okay, thank you.
Right, item 8.
All right, is this Bill? Or Mike? On the, okay, what we're doing here is basically just a consulting agreement to complete the citywide bicycle and pedestrian trails master plan.
Correct.
My question is when, during the course of this, obviously there's got to be a policy discussion about what our bike and pedestrian and transportation plan is. When does that come into this?
We will utilize two forums. One is the Economic Development Advisory Committee, which also serves as the transportation policy function. We'll also, our current plans are to simultaneously bring this item to the Parks Commission as well, and then it would be brought to the City Council for consideration.
So, but I mean, even before the consultant starts, because I think the plan that you're laying out is basically the consultant's going to do an analysis and it's going to get the stamp of approval by two commissions and then come to council. You know, my interest, I've expressed this in the past, is potentially use of neighborhood electric vehicle pathways as arteries. And this is really it's a non-motorized plan, but these types of vehicles would be incorporated into those types of plans, particularly major arteries. So if there was, for example, a policy agreement that we need to integrate NEVs with our transportation plan, when does that discussion come up?
I think we've in the past have let the council know that we are going to be looking at those as a viable alternative transportation means. And so the consultant plans on looking at those, and then it would be brought again to those policy committees for recommendation. But I don't think we're ruling it out, you know, from the beginning or anything.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes up, at least I'd like to see that consideration, and then at least brought to this forum to be able to discuss what the next steps are.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, I had actually a follow-up question on that. I couldn't find it in the scope. Is there, and I know we typically do a lot of outreach to the community to get folks to participate and have some public input in the process. Is that part of this?
Yes, we plan to do that. We have, unfortunately, a rather expedited time frame to complete this within the grant requirements by February 28th of 2013. So I think the current plan is to utilize those two committees, but do a extensive outreach. And we actually have, as part of the work that was done already, we had 1 to 2 meetings with the bicycle community to get their preliminary input. And what we plan to do is utilize the mailing list and the people that have participated to date to get them to be part of the discussion at those two commissions. Again, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left in the grant to do a large public outreach program, but we plan to utilize the resources we have, the people that have been involved to date, and to supplement those two policy commissions.
So would it be possible to include some of the folks that have expressed interest and want to go to whatever meetings are already scheduled? Is it possible to loop those folks in?
Oh, yes, yes.
Because I know during the National Night Out campaign, the mayor and I attended several community forums, and at least 3, there were folks who were expressed interest and knew this was coming up. So maybe even identifying those team captains, because I know we have contact information for them.
Sure.
And maybe just share with them that we're doing this and that it's that time. And here are some scheduled meetings if you'd like to participate and be heard on this part of this phase of the update. It would be timely.
Sure, we'd be happy to reach out to them.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So that concludes discussion on the consent items. So we're looking for a motion.
Second.
Did I miss that? Sorry, Ms. Flint. I didn't see that. You did. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. Are we transferring this money because of a transportation study that was done that maybe we don't have, if we don't have the Southport Bridge built, that will hinder some of the building in the north area? And I thought that we applied for these funds to deepen the Deepwater Channel to bring more business to the port to make it more viable. Didn't we have an agreement with Oakland at one time to bring container ships through here to help the port financially? And are we guaranteed funding in the future for any deepening of the water channel if we use these funds elsewhere?
All right. Those are great questions, Ms. Flint. Thank you very much. Mr. Panos, you want to respond?
Those are good questions. The first was with regards to whether or not this is in a plan. You know, this is the particular Pioneer Bluff Bridge, which is referred to in your staff report, is in the master plan, and it is in our planning documents to date. It's also in some of the SACOG and state funding plans that we put together, STIP and other things. So it's in those plans. The second question was with regards to, didn't we get this money for channel deepening? We did secure from the CTC money for that purpose. As stated in the agenda report, the time frame within which we can utilize that money is fast approaching, and we have the opportunity now, and we may not have this opportunity later, to reprogram that money, because the channel deepening, that money can only be used for construction, and the channel deepening project is not going to be ready for construction in the time frame for this particular set of money. And so it's basically we either use it or lose it. And so we're going to reprogram it to another needed planned goods movement transportation project here in the community that'll help both the port and the city of West Sacramento. And this seems like a viable approach to be able to use it before we lose it. And so that was that. It doesn't preclude us from going back out and looking at other state funding sources. We've got state funding on a number of our capital projects around the city, and so this certainly will not preclude us from going back out at the time of construction and seeking that. It will also not affect our federal funding at all in terms of our ability to go back to the federal government and continue to move the project forward. We're fully committed to the channel deepening project and moving it forward. It's just that all of the funding sources, and there are a variety of funding sources for this project, not all of them line up correctly sometimes. And in this particular case, the construction money may lapse before we get to construction, and we don't want to lose $10 million. We want to use it somewhere in the community for goods movement, transportation. We certainly don't want to turn it back. And some communities have had to turn it back. So, did I just get beeped? Sorry about that. No.
Just got beeped.
Sorry. I hope that answers the question.
Very nice.
Okay.
Very thorough. Thank you, Mr. Panos. All right. And I'll just add on to that very point that you made. And so part of, and I neglected to update, we had a Port Commission meeting earlier this evening as well. And part of this conversation, the action that was taken by the Port Commission earlier on this item as well, included a very sobering conversation about the future viability of the port and next steps, which are the Port Commission will be considering. It's actually a joint meeting, right? A joint meeting of the Council and the Port Commission. No? Sorry. Bill, you're stepping out. It's a different meeting, sorry. And so that conversation took place. So we had a very sobering conversation about the future viability of the port. So, all right. Now we're looking for a motion for the consent agenda items 2 through 8.
So moved with the amendment.
A motion to my left and a second to the right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously with the mayor absent. Item 9 is time set agenda, community development, and that's public hearing on consideration of resolution 12-43, requesting a vacation of an emergency access easement across the across the property located at 3045 Mulvaney Place. Ms. Hamilton? No, not yet.
Nope. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I'm Patricia Maish with the Community Development Division. I'm requesting abandonment of the existing fire access easement with the adoption of Resolution 1244, which was in the consent agenda. We no longer need the fire access easement as in its current configuration. So respectfully request abandonment of the easement.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is a public hearing, so I will open up the public hearing. I have no, so public hearing is officially open. I have no slips to speak on this item. I'll turn it back to the council for questions or a motion or comments.
Mayor, I'd move that we adopt Resolution 1243, declaring the existence of a 20-foot wide emergency access easement across the property located at 3045 Mulvaney Avenue.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second to my right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so with the council's indulgence, I think, given that Supervisor Matt Rexroad is here from Woodland and soon to be representing a significant portion of our community, I know he's here on item 13, so if okay with everybody else, I'll move item 13 up. Would that help? Yeah, okay. Let's see, so we'll move up item 13 next, and that's a presentation and discussion of ordinance 12-12 and draft resolution 12-55, amending chapters 10.36 of the West Sacramento Municipal Code regarding truck route restrictions. Mr. Lucan, good evening.
Good evening. The item you have in front of you tonight is a request to have a discussion of the modification to the municipal code to allow a agricultural vehicle through modifying the weight restriction for that particular County Road 22. And it's a very simple item to change that weight restriction. And staff has worked with the county, the California Highway Patrols, the city police department, and many departments here in the city to come up with a solution. We feel this solution is a good one. Chris, if you want to show the particular road section. Located in the northwest portion of West Sacramento, this County Road 22 is utilized by agricultural vehicles, and the unintended consequence of updating the city's truck route map was the inability to utilize this particular section of road by certain agricultural vehicles, and the weight limitation or the weight restriction modification would provide what staff and the team feels is the simplest means by which to modify this section of the road to allow those agricultural vehicles to ingress and egress that route. This city has a long-standing policy of assisting the agricultural community in and around West Sacramento and in Yolo County, and we feel that this motion supports is a continual support of the city's policy to assist agriculture in the region. With that, I'll conclude my short presentation and answer any questions you might have. Peter Hansen, also with the Transportation Division, is also here for any other technical questions.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lucan. Are there any questions or comments at this point?
Yes, the only comment I was made is when we did this last year, I know that I received a number of calls from Mr. Peabody and Kent Lang and some other folks that were along South River Road. And this isn't only just an issue of a truck route, and this is also it's also an issue of the shortest distance that these people can get to get rid of the goods that they produce. So it really saves in a couple different ways. I mean, I realize that we had some issues with some folks along North Harbor. People were using the Jake brake and making some noises and some other kinds of things. But at the same time, I think this really makes a lot of sense. It's good for them. It shortens their distances that they have to travel, because if they don't, they got to go all the way down South River Road and catch I-5 freeway down at Elkhorn. So this really does make a lot of sense.
All right, we do have one slip to speak by Supervisor Rexroad. Oh, don't tell him that. All right. So you're good with it? You don't need to speak on the item? Okay. All right. Well, I know that we've had, I know a supervisor brought it up at the 2x2. We've had plenty of discussion. I know staff was working with their staff. I know the city manager has had some say in it as well. So it sounds like we're trying to address what otherwise is a worthy issue here. All right. If there are no other questions or comments, I think we need a motion on this change. All right, so we have a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. And then I think we're going to do, I know the mayor should be back shortly and wanted to chime in on one of the items, so we'll take them out of order. We'll go back to item 10, which is consideration of Resolution 12-54, a resolution of intention to approve an amendment to the contract between the Board of Administration, California Public Employees Retirement System, and the City Council of West Sacramento. Mr. Phil Wright.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, this is really just an administrative cleanup. The council has already approved the contract with fire, which included a new second tier. In order to implement the second tier, we need to have this resolution of intent, and then we need to come back on December 5th with an urgency ordinance in order to get the second tier in place before January 1. So with that, staff recommends adoption of the resolution of intent.
All right. We don't have any slips on item 10. So are there any questions or comments by anybody on the council? Nope. Seeing none.
You ready for a motion?
I'm looking for a motion.
So moved to the recommended action.
All right. And we have a motion and a second. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries unanimously once again. All right. We're moving pretty quickly, so we'll skip 11. We'll go to 12, which is presentation and discussion of alternatives for regulation of medical marijuana cultivation. Is that Ms. Hamilton? Okay. Good evening.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. Get this adjusted here. So we're bringing this before you this evening at the request of community members. I think we even had a council request to take a look at cultivation of medical marijuana. We outlined in the staff report some research that we had done leading up to this, looking at other jurisdictions, what they've been doing, what's going on in the courts, and also taking a look at the statistics that we obtained from our police department, looking back a few years. And as you can see in the staff report, the complaints related to marijuana have been almost doubling over the last couple years each year. And the police department has indicated that these statistics, it actually may even be higher, because when a call comes in to our dispatch, typically it's classified as a narcotic complaint. If it has if there's specifics entered in regarding marijuana into the system, into the dispatch system, then that's what was captured. So it could even be higher. Plus, these statistics do not contain any information from Yolo County Narcotics Enforcement Team. So there's nothing in here from YONET. So we've seen an increase over the last 2 years, kind of doubling crime-related calls for service, such as thefts, residential burglaries. Those are increasing. And so we thought we'd bring this item before you, get some direction, look at the alternatives. When we were looking at what's going on around the state, we saw kind of 4 general categories of how jurisdictions are dealing with this. So the first category was an outright prohibition, no cultivation of marijuana whatsoever. And then the second category is simply prohibiting the outdoor cultivation, meaning that most of the ordinances say that they must be grown in an enclosed type structure that has a roof and 4 walls. And then some of them, there's variations of each of these categories. Some jurisdictions go into much more detail with regard to specifying the type of structure it can be grown in, the wattage of the light fixtures, etc. Then others have regulated both indoor and outdoor by either specifying outdoor has to be grown in an enclosure, not necessarily roofed. They limit the square footage of the grow area. They apply setbacks from property lines of where the grow area can be located. There may even be minimum acreage requirements to even cultivate at all on the property. And then there's also indoor requirements. Jurisdictions are limiting the amount of square footage indoors that can be cultivated, and even limiting what rooms in a residence it can occur in, and the amount of wattage that could be applied for lighting. So there's kind of a gamut. And then many of those, as they're trying to figure out which way they're going to go, they've gone the route of doing an urgency moratorium while they figure it out. So that's what we're proposing. We're looking kind of for a discussion tonight on kind of the general categories, what your thoughts are, and then we are recommending that we return with an urgency ordinance for a moratorium while we try to get maybe some results from the court. We're hopeful. There's a lot of things pending. And then also while we work on whatever ordinance you would like us to bring back. Right now, the growing season is kind of stopped for outdoor cultivation, but it will be returning in the spring, so I think we need to look at something. So that concludes my presentation. Available for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. All right. I don't have any slips to speak on this item, so I'll return to the council for discussion. Mr. Johansson.
Yeah, so I guess my main concern about this is just the health and safety aspect to the communities. And it sounds like we really don't have a lot of good information, complete information on the effect of outside cultivation and crime. But I know Sacramento has gone through this. And now, do they have an outright ban, indoor, outdoor, or is it just an outdoor ban?
In Sacramento?
Yeah, didn't they?
They're
just
working on an ordinance right now.
Okay, I thought, so in Sac City,
I'm sorry.
they, I mean, there's no ban yet in terms of cultivation. Okay, well, I mean, from my perspective, we just need to get, make sure we have the data, but it looks like there is an impact on outside cultivation, in terms of disturbance of their neighbors and the potential targets for crime and break-ins. We really kind of have just very little information on that, except for it looks like there's going to be an increase, but it sounds like the ONET provide more information or could provide some more information. But and I don't really see a distinction between outdoor versus indoor cultivation. Like if there's indoor cultivation, has anybody seen an increase in crime?
The outdoor cultivation seems to be receiving more attention. That's what we're getting more complaints on. We're getting complaints about odor from adjacent properties during certain times of the season when it gets close to harvest. And then the outdoor cultivation tends to be more visible. So it seems to be a little bit more of a target for crime.
Mr. Kristoff.
It's sort of humorous here. We talk about all of the negativity as far as crime and all of that. And for me, an outright prohibition is the way to go. But I understand that we have some real issues there as far from a legal perspective. So I think that your recommendation is the right recommendation. I think it is a recommendation to have a 45-day moratorium so we can start to get our act together. But we have a number of things that may assist us for the final ordinance that we eventually write. One's the feds. What's the feds going to do? I mean, the feds say that no, you cannot do that, and they intervene or have intervened in the past, even though they've been asked step lightly. There's really been a number of places that have run afoul, and we really don't need to be in that situation. And then the other one's the courts. What's going to happen as these different cases eventually go through the courts? And so, I mean, I think we need to sit down and look at, what's happening through the court system and through the federal system, and then make our determinations then as far as what the ordinance should really look like.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlene, for putting the information together and starting the discussion. It's an important one that we start to have. The thing that I will bring forward is I had asked to kind of look into this because it was under my understanding that Sacramento City had passed an ordinance. So have they passed it, or have they?
Am I behind? And when I was researching this, trying to pull this
together, I think they did a few weeks ago.
Okay.
I thought they actually voted and passed for outdoor.
An older agenda, but
whether
I pulled up one and it said they were directing staff.
Again, that might be the distinction.
That
might be the distinction. I don't know, but when reading through it, I thought they had voted for
There's a number of them that are looking
I know
towards
Elk
the
Grove,
outdoor regulation or ban.
So Elk Grove has, that was one impetus for me to bring this forward, because Sacramento was looking at it and as a way as a pathway, kind of leading a pathway forward, but also because having a friend and watching 10 to 12 foot plants growing behind his yard and actually smelling it and how visible it was from the streets, I can't, again, I think we do need to get more information on. I would be interested in hearing from Yonet as regards what actual crime is related to it. If we don't have the information ourselves, is Yonet getting similar complaints? I can tell you that neighbors in that area weren't happy about what their neighbor was growing, and it was a nuisance because of the smell. It was I don't want to say it was crime related, but certainly they were fearful of repercussions because you could see the plants from the street in a backyard. So I think those are the kind of things that, in essence, the city not being able to address that in any way, shape, or form. The issue here isn't. I think the issue from a legal standpoint is the state and the state's very vague rules and understanding of what can be enforced, what can't, in regards to medical marijuana and the cultivation of such. I think the feds have actually been the ones who have been enforcing cultivation and farming of marijuana,
yes,
correct?
The federal government, the Obama administration, started off by sending a message that this was not high on their list of items to enforce. I think that perhaps was overread by advocates in California, and then a year or two ago, maybe, the Attorney General came out, or the U.S. attorneys announced that no, in fact, they were going to be cracking down on, at least on large operations.
Right.
So we're now in a period where at the federal level it's very confused as to what exactly the federal government is doing. And the state courts have looked at a number of issues, but have not really focused any cases yet specifically on cultivation. So there are some cases making their way to the California Supreme Court, which we hope will shed some guidance within the next year or so. And that's sort of where we are right now.
So I think what led to us, to at least myself, trying to have us address this is that with that ambiguity in enforcement and no local ordinance addressing it other than, I think, state guidance on how many plants you can grow and so on and so forth. I think it left police forces across the state to a degree powerless to enforce any nuisance. But the way I look at it is that if you're in a rural area and your neighbor, where an area is prone to grass fires and your neighbor is you're keeping your weeds down to prevent fires and your neighbor doesn't, I mean, there's action that the city can take to make sure there's weed abatement and that fire suppression is there. I kind of look at this in the same vein, that if you're growing a potentially a plant which I understand is being used for medical purposes, but is drawing attention of a criminal element that may bring them onto your property, through your property, or bring harm to your being, then I think we have the same responsibility to provide some enforcement of where that can be grown. And I think that's what I'm looking for. It is the outdoor cultivation that I'm concerned about, because there's really there's no way for us to enforce that other than asking how many plants are you growing, and then we don't, whether we get a good answer or what we could do about it locally is the vague part. So I think that the distinction here you have is a prohibit outdoor cultivation versus the moratorium. Just allows us more time to study it. Is that basically the direction?
Yes, to finish pulling together a potential ordinance, based on your direction tonight, how, if we are going to regulate in some way, what is that regulation going to look like? We needed to know whether you had an interest in regulating indoor. But the moratorium is really to kind of set it in place so that we at least damper it for now until we can get something in place that gives us a tool to help regulate it better.
Well, I am supportive of going forward with sort of looking at the moratorium on the outdoor cultivation, because we have a really short winter and it'll be springtime before we know it, and growing season will be back, and I know it's here for 2 or 3 months, but it'll be back, and if we can get in front of this, 45 days from today puts us into January, and February in March by the time we kind of get to it, we at least will have something in the place that we can study. So I'm in favor of that. I don't know in regards to indoor cultivation and how we can regulate that, more, let alone enforce it, and other than, the thing you fear with that is indoor, houses becoming basically greenhouses for marijuana cultivation.
And those, indoor gets a little trickier because most of the ordinance that we've looked at that have some indoor regulation usually requires some sort of permit to cultivate indoors. So now we're going to get back into that discussion, likely with the advocates, about having to identify themselves and pull a permit, and there's going to be a cost for that. In looking at it and talking to other building staff, there are, through the limitations on the number of plants they can cultivate under the Prop 215, with those limitations, and then with just the basic building code, the fire code, PG&E kind of watches when there's a spike in electrical usage, so sometimes we get some tips that way about maybe some alterations that shouldn't have occurred inside a residence that is then posing some sort of public safety issue.
Right.
So I'm thinking that there may be enough in place for the indoor so that we don't have to get into that, but that'll be something we'll look at a little bit more before we come back to you.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable approach given what we're experiencing in our community. I guess the one question I do have, and I know the courts will ultimately well, hopefully give us some guidance about what we can and cannot do. There isn't any cost associated with this other than the preparation or some of the research done by the attorneys and the staff's preparation. But if we start getting complaints about this, theoretically, if we were to carry it out, it would be in ordinance. It'd be in a city ordinance, and we would have to respond theoretically to complaints. I know we get some complaints. We don't get a lot, but we get complaints. So then procedurally, how would that work? I mean, do we have law enforcement showing up, or we have code enforcement showing up to look in people's backyards if there's a complaint, or is it too premature to get into process procedures or steps for how it would be handled? I'm just making sure we're budgeting for what could be costs associated, or unless they're so nominal that it's not worth worrying about at the moment.
Yeah, that's something we'll look at and bring back more. You know, this item we've spent kind of minimal time on it, mostly just looking at other jurisdictions and what's going on in the courts. We have quite a bit more to gather to get some more data and stats on the issues and try to get more information from YONET. But the other jurisdictions that we've seen, it's a combination of possibly code enforcement and police that tend to respond to the nuisance complaints.
All right, great. Well, I think it's a reasonable approach given what we've seen to be, I mean, in some cases, just utter disregard for your neighbors when plants are hanging over into their yard, and the smell that comes along with it. That's been problematic. So I think this is a reasonable approach. Great. All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
I think we have what we need, so we'll come back to you on December 5th with an urgency ordinance for moratorium on outdoor cultivation only, and then we'll begin gathering more information to bring something back to you, most likely in January. If we can't make that time frame, then we'll be back to you in January to possibly consider an extension of that moratorium while we continue to work on things.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Ms. Hamilton. So you don't need any action from us then, right? Just. Oh yeah, we do.
Other than to direct us to come back on December 5th with an interim urgency ordinance.
So we're going to need a motion. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, motion carries unanimously, right? Thank you very much. Okay, so back to, I'm just kind of jumping around here a little bit. Item 11 is our last item, right? Making sure I'm counting correctly. Yes, item 11 is consideration of proposed on-street parking program associated with the West Capitol Commons project located in Rayleigh's Landing. Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This evening, I'm surprised the development team, I don't believe, is here on this item, and I thought for sure they were going to be here, so I don't know if there's been a complication.
I think they went home when we did the one on number 6.
I didn't see them here at all tonight.
Oh, okay.
And I'm really surprised. So, in light of that, and in light of the fact that the mayor is not here, and I know he had an interest in this item, I'm thinking that we need to continue this item over to December 5th.
All right.
You know, the project has begun grading, but this is perimeter, and I think it's got a little bit more time. I'll check back with Mark.
I was going to ask, is there's no time?
So
it's not time sensitive?
There's no
I mean, they would have liked to have gotten through this tonight. The development team I know would. They've been working with us on, you know, what phase 2 will look like, and we've got a meeting scheduled finally with PG&E. So we're trying to get some movement on phase 2, and so they're just trying to move through all these items. But I don't think it's that time sensitive that it cannot wait until December 5th.
Okay. Well, sounds like that's what the city manager is urging us to do as well. So we will, do we need a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to continue to December 5th.
All right, so we have a motion to the right and second to the left to continue it to the next meeting, December 5th. So that'll be the order. All right, that takes us through the regular agenda, and now we are at council calendar.
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, this is our last meeting of the month, and we will be closing the Thanksgiving holiday November 22nd and 23rd. Not on your calendar is on November 27th from 2 to 4 here in the Galleria. We're going to have a little celebration celebrating the fact that City Hall has been in existence for 10 years this year. And so I'd love to have any of the council members stop by and say hello to the employees and have a brief celebration with us. Christmas tree lighting is on the 30th of November, and then this Santa's breakfast is going to be on the community center on December 8th. That's all. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I lost my place here because I don't think. All right. City manager report.
No report.
No report. City attorney report. No report. Staff direction from council members. Seeing none. Agenda items. We've got. I didn't see any. All right. So that takes us to the end of the agenda. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion a second. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.